Hello. You guys asked me to show you how I use inner shadow and inner glow to create shadows on objects in Photoshop. So I thought I'd jump on quickly now and show you how I do it. I say that I've actually been trying to get this video live for all of this week, but I did a different speaking to camera bit, and I had so many technical issues with it. So I'm just doing this really quickly through like the little camera on my laptop, so it looks probably pretty crappy. But anyway, I just wanted to do a quick introduction to the video. It's fairly straightforward. It's a useful tool to have in your arsenal. It's not the only way to do it. Different images will kind of react differently to different techniques, but this is certainly one that I use quite a lot. So without further ado, I will flip the screen and we can get on with the tutorial. So I thought I'd show you how I created the shadow and highlights on this image that I posted to Instagram a few days or a week or so ago, because it was one that required quite a bit of work, because as you can see there is a strong light source from the moon, but the image I took of me was fairly flat lighting. The window was just in front of me, so I was relatively evenly lit all over. So to make this image work, I need to get strong highlights around my head, and then some shadow coming in from the underneath. So the way I did that was to go down to the layer that I'd cut out of me, and if you double click on it, it brings up your layer style panel. If you go down to, we'll do the shadow first. If you go to inner shadow, it brings up the adjusters excuse me, for the inner shadow. So you can already see that it's actually applied something to me. I'm just going to tweak what it's done though. So blend mode set to multiply. Have a fiddle with blend modes and whatnot, but multiply for shadows is usually one that you want to be using, but it kind of can depend on what you're working with, what effect you want to achieve. And then you can change the colour of the shadow. Now for this I want to, basically when I'm doing shadow I try and pick a colour that's natural to the object, because not all shadows are necessarily kind of a hard black. So I kind of look at the object and select a fairly natural shadow on it. So let's pick something down there. Then what I do is work my way down all of these sliders basically. So we'll leave the opacity where it's at for now, and the angle here is just the angle of the light source, or where the shadow will be. So if I switch all the way around here, you can see the shadow is now on my head and it's lighter down by my feet. So that's not what I want. I want the shadow to be down by my feet and on the underside of me. Basically I want it to end up, in fact the moon's right above me, so I probably want the pointer pointing down so the shadow comes in all around the underside of me. So we'll put it somewhere around there, maybe with a touch more to that way. The distance I set fairly high up on this one, just because it would be quite a strong shadow underneath. So it's probably about right where it was, more or less. Choke, again, you can fiddle with it, kind of brings it in further, makes it a harder line, and kind of eventually completely covers you in shadow. So pull that in to where you think looks good. And then the size is kind of the spread of the shadow, so kind of how soft and hard it looks. I don't fully understand how to explain each of these different adjustments, but I play with them until it kind of is all starting to look about right for the image that I'm working on. So I quite like how that's looking now. And there you can see the shadow that's been added. Now the way this works is it adds shadow kind of pretty much everywhere around the object that you're working on, which we don't want. So what we now need to do is click OK, and that will apply you can see down here it's applied the inner shadow as an effect that's attached to that layer. We need to break that away from the layer so that it's still applying the same effect, but so that we can add a mask on to edit it and remove the bits where we don't want shadow to be. So if you right click on the inner shadow, you can select create layer and click OK, and you can see that's now moved the shadow onto its own separate layer, but the effect is still there. So as with any other masking, we just click the square with the circle in it to bring up our layer mask. Go and get our pen tool, set it to black because we want to hide some of the shadow. We'll set our brush to be pretty soft because especially when you're working with these kind of shadows, it all needs to be fairly soft. In fact, I'm just going to put it right down to 0. I will take my opacity. No, I'll leave my opacity up for now because I actually want to completely remove the shadow from some of the areas. And then just increase my brush size and start painting away where I don't want the shadow to be. So given that the light source is here, anything kind of at the top of my body wouldn't be in shadow. So my hands wouldn't be, top of my dress here wouldn't be, my head certainly wouldn't be. So I just work my way around painting away the bits where I'm fairly certain the shadow wouldn't be hitting, and then leaving in the bits where I think it would be. So that top bit there, I think the underneath of my arm does need to be in shadow because that wouldn't be getting the light hit it quite as well. I'm gonna take the shadow away from the insides of me here a little bit, and then I suppose my hips would be under my arms, so they would have a touch of shadow on them, and then everything else kind of coming down here pretty much needs to have that shadow hitting it. So you can see now we've got shadow just on the areas where it should be. Just take that back a bit. So that's done the shadow, but now what I want to do is, because I'm obviously quite close to the light source, I'm pointing at the screen as if you can see my hands, I've just realised. So I'm quite close to the light source, which is the moon. So I think certainly on the very top of my body, I think I'd be a bit more glowing. So we go back down to the layer of me, double click on it, and this time we're going to work with Inner Glow. With Inner Glow, you probably, for this effect, you'd want the blend mode set to colour dodge probably. Opacity you kind of adjust depending on how you want it to look. We'll leave it there for the minute. We're going to change the colour of this light to match the kind of colour that would be coming off of the moon. So let's select kind of a grey, kind of whitey grey colour. And then we need to, you can already see that it's applied that glow again everywhere around me. So we're just going to play with these bits. I don't think the shape needs doing too much, more about the size there, until we start to see a nice bit of light coming there on my face and hands. So when you're happy with that, you click OK, and again go and right click on this to create a layer. Stop that popping up. And now it's its own separate layer. We can go in and do the same thing again, but this time removing it kind of from the opposite place where we took the shadow from, I suppose. Yes, and then we just start painting away the bits that we don't want. So we have our mask selected, we've got our black, we've got a soft brush, our opacity is right up. That's it. And then we just paint away where we don't want this inner glow to be. So basically anywhere down here we didn't want it. Don't want it on the underside because they're still meant to be in shadow. So we'll leave them as they are. And then I might just take the opacity down so that it's kind of blended, a little bit of a gradient of the effect coming on my face and just underneath here. So now, if we look at that, oh, I missed a bit down there. You can see that it's now just affecting the top part of my body, which is kind of what you'd expect from where the moon is. So if I turn both of those effects off, you can see this is where we were. And we added some shadow, added some highlights, and it's just giving you a more realistic impression of how the light would be affecting the object, in this case me. I hope that has helped. It's quite a simple technique, but quite a useful one for adding the shadows and the highlights. It's really handy to be able to break away these effects so that you can mask them so they only affect the areas you want them to. That's a really handy tool to have in your arsenal. It's not the only way to do shadows and highlights. I don't know if it's the best way or not. I think time will tell, and I'll keep practicing, but it is working quite nicely for me at the moment, so I'll continue playing with it. Yes, I hope this helped. If you have any questions about it or anything else, or would like me to do any other tutorials, just let me know, and I will see what I can do. Bye!